All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Luke Pedotti at his home in Carlton. It's April 6th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining us today, Luke. We really appreciate this.
Thanks for coming out.
First question for you. Why viticulture?
Well, my family was involved with agriculture starting back in the 20s. I grew up in Northern California on the coast. My grandfather started a dairy, purchased a dairy business from his brother-in-law there in 1926, and that was the ranch I was born and raised on. He raised dairy cows until 1955, and then switched over to cows and sheep, beef cattle. And then about the time I was born, my folks came back and helped my grandfather with a partner in the ranch. So I grew up as a ranch kid, mended fences, working cows and sheep and things like that. So I have a deep connection to agriculture. Not so much the sheep, but I like working with the cows. Anyhow, I went through high school, went off to college, started out at Santa Rosa Junior College. And, at that point you're thinking, well, what am I going to do? And I sure like ag. I was in 4-H and FFA for a long time. But I knew, especially growing up down in Sonoma County, the handwriting was on the wall. My folks were looking at leaving California. It was getting too hard to ranch. And our family vacations consisted of road trips to Oregon. And so they were looking up here for a long time. But at that time, I went off to school, and my folks ended up making the decision to get out of ranching. Mm-hmm. And they headed to Roseburg. Mm-hmm. They still live today. And I had a decision to make. And so I went off to Cal Poly, because all the ag kids went down to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. Had friends that went down there. And I wanted to stay in ag, and in Sonoma and Napa counties, the predominant industry in agriculture is grapes. So, and I liked it. We had a family friend while I was still going to Cal Poly. He got me an internship over in the Alexander Valley working for Clos de Bois. And I always thought that the Alexander Valley was like the epitome of California vineyards. It's a lot of those old vineyards that the Italians originally planted way back when, and I think the Alexander Valley store and so on and so forth. But there's one of those tangents we were talking about. Anyways, he got me a job working there as an intern, and it wasn't a real structured internship. It was, I showed up the first day, I jumped in the back of the truck with the crew, and I went out and I worked on the end of a shovel for a good month and a half, and polished up some of my Spanish that I learned in high school, and got a real good sense for what it's like to work in the vineyards, work with the crew. And it was a great experience. So I went back after that summer. I was actually able to experience a harvest because it was an early harvest that year. That would have been 97-ish. And went back, finished school. Came out of school, got a job through a friend working in the Russian River. And at that point, the Russian River, had been known for years as, Gravestein capital, and lots of apple trees, orchards. But a lot of those were coming out. And now, that's pushing 25 years ago. And so I went to work for a family operation, vineyard management company, also owned a lot of their own land. It was Dutton Ranch. And it was a great experience, great family, learned a ton. And that was right during that development period. And so got to experience firsthand, just what it took. Mm-hmm. Right out of school. I've always liked working with machinery. And so had a lot of that experience, just, put in irrigation systems and prepping land and tractor work and things like that. But it was a family-run operation, and after 3 years, knew that there was a ceiling to how far I could go there. There was younger family members coming up, and so I made the hard decision to move on. And that came about through another friend from college. She called up one day. My wife and I were just recently married in 2000. And she said, my dad's managing about 7,000 acres of farm ground up in the Willamette Valley. And he's got about 150 acres of grapes. He doesn't know much about grapes. He needs somebody to be a manager for him, be a farm manager. So, okay, that's pretty interesting. And Sonoma County, we were living in Windsor. And I was born and raised in Sonoma County, and I have a place in my heart for it, but there was just getting to be way too many people. And it was taking forever to go down the freeway. And so we're like, no, we should go up and check this out. So we made a road trip, my wife and I did, and visited with the ranch manager. And he took us around, and it was, very similar to today. Just not a cloud in the sky, beautiful day, had a nice trip up. And he showed us around some of the properties, and it's like, what's there not to like about the Willamette Valley? What a beautiful spot. And so we accepted and made the big jump. It was an adventure. We didn't have kids at the time, so I said, okay, well, this might be an opportunity. And looking back, it certainly was. And it was a good time because, Oregon's been going for a couple generations, the wine business has. But there was a lot of stuff that was, changing it 20 years ago here. So I feel very fortunate, just dumb luck for that to have happened, and thankful that that opportunity was given to me. So I went to work, and that employer was Del Smith in Evergreen Aviation. Wasn't working for the aviation, but for the farming. So, and that was about when the museum piece was just planted, and we're training it up. And that's when I came in, finishing the irrigation system on it. Green patch out of Dundee, altogether was about 150 acres. So it allowed me that was really my first opportunity to, here you go, manage a vineyard with limited support. And that was a great opportunity. I was there for about 3 years. Got a call 2014 from Matt Novak, managed Results Partners at the time, did for a number of years, knew him through the industry. And he said, hey, looking to make a change? I said, yeah, 3 years into this, yeah. And, I'd been in vineyard management before, and I liked how it was structured. Every day is a new day, vineyard management, working with clients and so on. He said, do you want to change? He said, let's go talk. And we did. And, I still remember Matt saying, if you like driving tractors and trucks and stuff, that's fine. But if you want to come to work for Results Partners, he says, this is where you'd learn business, how to run an operation. And so that's the place this is an opportunity for you. And I said, well, that's a new opportunity. I like it. And that was a great move. Really was. That was 2014. And we were about, under 300 acres at that point. We didn't have an admin department really, a daily admin department. We, on top of managing operations and development and so on in the field with a really solid crew at the time, to this day as well, but we also did QuickBooks and did all the invoicing. And so I look back at that and I can remember some long days and lots of hours and late nights and then after that, keeping up with your email. But man, did it pay off. I feel it did. Just made you, it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And and then we, with that, as like I was mentioning earlier, the industry just seemed to be growing, and we really went on a development spike there from 2004. I'm a decade off. Oh. I started in 2004.
That changes the story a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So as we did quite a bit of development in that period, and then by the 2009, we were going through a bit of the recession. Things were kind of changing and were a little bit uncertain. And another opportunity came up, and that was for me to go work with Winemakers Investment Properties, Kent Johnston, over east of Salem. They were planting, Ken had just planted about 500 acres of vineyard over there on that side, as well up on Ribbon Ridge. And they had the Battle Creek Vineyard. And it was a different twist because it was very much production oriented with some high quality sites, but it was really geared to mechanization. And you know, Ken had some really great ideas about how to do that, things he brought up from California as well. Mm-hmm. So there, I was there for 3 years, from basically 2010. I'll get my dates right this time, 2010, 11, and 12, working with that team. And, you know, that was a great experience too. We ran machine harvesters before there was as many machine harvesters in the valley as there is now. Just mechanization, doing multiple things with one tractor at the same time, just looking for those kinds of efficiencies. Mm-hmm. Good team over there. And I got a call. It's starting to sound like a pattern here. Then I got a call. Daniel Fay, after I left Results Partners, he had joined. He was the president at the time, still is. Called me, asked me if I wanted to come back. I said, yeah, I really do miss vineyard management, custom farming. You know, it's like I mentioned, it's every day's a new day. You've got lots of different folks to work with. It's a diverse customer base, mm-hmm. Client base, and you know, the neat thing is tomorrow I might wake up and there might be, you know, a brand new project in front of us, mm-hmm. and I've always gravitated to the development side. That's what I do. I'm currently with Results Partners. Have been ever since 2000 and into 2012, 2013, mm-hmm. and head up the development department along with a few other things, and have a great team, and that's all. I mean, we say this quite often, and you can't. The only way to make these kinds of operations work is with teamwork and mm-hmm. people with their expertise and bringing it all together and knowing when to call upon your peers, and that's allowed us to, you know, to grow and provide opportunities for everybody within, and hopefully provide our clients, you know, with a really good, solid service. Mm-hmm. How's that sound for like a promo? That's
pretty good. I like that. Yeah, we'll cut that and make that, add that for a commercial. So I'm gonna come back to RP. I have a lot of questions for you about your work at RP, but I'm kind of curious about your path along the way. You mentioned kind of being thrown in at a couple of places like Dutton Ranch, kind of being you're here you go. Tell me about the kind of learning process for you. What did you need to know about farming grapes that you didn't? What were the hardest things for you to kind of learn and learn to explore for yourself?
Well, you know, I'd say. Maybe it's jumping around a bit. Maybe it wasn't necessarily learned at Dutton Ranch, but I think one thing that stands out in my mind once I moved to Oregon is that Oregon is a different beast. It's not California mm-hmm. on a lot of levels, and I think most people would agree. From a farming standpoint, and the first thing you realize that first year is, wow, the weeds grow really fast here, and don't get behind on weed control, whatever your method may be. The disease pressure is greater here. Be diligent. You can't always wait for the perfect time to do things. You know, I think it just comes with experience that you can see it coming. Try to avoid a train wreck or a problem, you know. And sometimes you have to push the envelope a little bit to get things done. Very rarely do we see a perfect time to do things. You know, it's springtime, you get beautiful days like this. It's time to go out there and work around, or tomorrow it could just pour down rain, and it might. I think it's in the forecast to rain a little bit, and that changes everything. Mm-hmm. And so do your best job of planning ahead, and when you see the opportunity, just move forward. Mm-hmm. And this paid off, I feel. That too, and that's, you know, you might run into a problem, whatever the case may be, and it always appears like a bigger problem initially than it really is. Sometimes you need to just back away and take a deep breath, and it always seems to work out that way. I can, you know, I think, I mean, 2020, perfect example of that. probably don't have to go into that too much to show the challenges of that year. But going back to 2011, it looked like a cakewalk. In hindsight, 2011 was a cool vintage. Didn't know if we were going to ripen anything. Some cases, it was really tough to ripen. And but as a result, I think a lot of people came away from that vintage with some new tools, both in disease control management, and, farming practices, and winemaking, for that matter. And so that's what gives me. If anybody's nervous about the future, that's what gives me hope. I think that people in the industry can adapt pretty darn well, and you have to.
Tell me about developing your kind of style or philosophy behind viticulture. Did you obviously you were around a lot of different styles early on, I'm assuming, and tell me about what did you take away along the way as you kind of developed how you wanted to farm, and ideally.
Well, I'd be lying to say there isn't a place in my heart for production agriculture and efficiencies. At the same time, we've put together some very nice vineyard developments on the small scale that are aimed at high tier programs. And I think that I come from a different perspective because I spend a lot of time on the development side, and helping with site selection and the build out. The vineyard is a key component of that, but that's not where it stops. A lot of times there's a house or a tasting room or some sort of a tourism venue. And I just enjoy, even though I'm not an architect, but a lot of times we're in there at the ground floor to help kind of plan out where those different spaces are going to be, and to look at a rough piece of property, take somebody's goals and dreams, and try to make that a reality. I find that really rewarding. I like the nuts and bolts part of it. Now, we farm a lot of vineyards as well, and I've been involved with that, but and it's always very fulfilling to know that the grapes that you've helped grow are going into high scoring wines. But there's a lot of different variables in that whole thing to get it to the end consumer, right? So that's what makes it unique. There's definitely some handoffs in the whole process. You come in, you develop a vineyard, you farm it, deliver the grapes to the winery, and it's in somebody else's hands. And maybe those grapes go to 5 or 6 different wineries out of one vineyard. It's interesting to see what the outcome is from those different operations.
So when you came back to Results Partners, was development where you were headed right away? Was that kind of initially part of what you were working on, or at what point did that become kind of the main part of your work?
It's funny, it's my whole career has been around development. I mean, I farm vineyards too, but it's development. The only time that development really slowed down, if you look back at when I started right out of school, Russian River, moved here, farmed for 3 years at Evergreen, and then in 2004 started the development. And other than the recession with a couple of years, it kind of sloughed off a bit. Developments, I mean, it's an industry. The organ industry has just been going up, and we still see that. We're still planting a lot of vineyards today. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does. And so tell me more about your role with that. Then, are you mentioned your role kind of helping people realize their dreams or take their dreams and make them a reality. So tell me how you feel your role and how it plays out with different clients. What is the impact that your work has on the kind of the end goal for the client?
Oh, it's communication is the big thing. It's setting expectations, helping people, shepherding the process. So, if a new client comes in, it's oftentimes I meet with those folks and kind of give them an overview from our perspective, from a grower's perspective of the industry. And it depends. If they're in a state, typically they already know what kind of grapes they want to plant and how they want to plant it. We're there to help. But we also have folks that will come in and who want to plant a vineyard and more of a lifestyle. And so they need a little more direction, and we're happy to do that and explain that process and to be upfront with folks. I mean, it's agriculture. You're going to have good years and bad years. But yeah.
Do you find that most of your clients are adequately prepared, or do you find that you have to do a lot of that kind of like upfrontness that they're not necessarily ready for that talk?
No, I think most people, if they've come to us or come to me at this point, it's I use us because it's
Sure.
it's not just me. It's
Sure.
in my current position, it's definitely a team. So no, I think they're already mentally there. They put themselves there, and they're ready to move forward at that point.
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of those development clients over the years, we've taken it through the development process, and then in my role at Results Partners, and I've continued on as a client manager. So I'm that interface, and so you meet with those folks, and and make sure that everything's is working out based to plan. At some point, though, it makes better sense once you're up into production to move those people over and integrate a vineyard manager with an RP. So I'm heavily involved in the development process, but still have a foot definitely in the production side. But more as I get older and move further up the chain, it's just more shepherding and making sure resources are being put where they need to be put. Because there's people that are far better at certain things than I am. That's part of the evolution of it all, is determining that, like, you know what, I tried that to try to be the best at that, and sometimes you have to call a spade, and it's time to call in reinforcements, and that's okay. In my position.
Tell me about the process for you of sort of working on a site. What are you looking for with clients? When the client comes to you, they have this site in mind. What do you do next? What is your role in the process? What are you looking for in a site to help them get what they want out of it?
Yeah, there's the obvious factors or aspects that you're looking for. One of them being aspect, and your soil type, of course, and elevation and things like that all play in. And farmability too. I mean, you could have a lot of the right aspects, but if you can't farm it, or if it's really steep, there's a place for that type of vineyard. But at that point, if you can't really mechanize it and work it efficiently, then you're locked into farming to the high tier. And so, yeah, looking at those kinds of things, it's also getting a good understanding for what an individual wants to do long term. You might look at a piece of ground a little bit differently if it's going to be developed into an estate with a winery. You might look at, in terms of of planting, you might explore with some more unique varieties based on what their future wine program might be. If you're just if you bought a parcel and you plan on living there, and just selling the grapes, we're going to attack it a little bit different way. You're farming then. And so we want to be planting marketable varieties.
You'd mentioned that one of the things you like about your job is that the days you never really know what to expect day to day. But take us through kind of a typical day or a typical week or month for you. What do your weeks look like, and what kind of actions are you taking in a normal week or month?
Well, in this point in my career, it's. I guess I could speak to the vineyard side of it, but I'm part of the management team, and so there's just a lot of business management that happens on a daily basis, and we employ a lot of folks, and so there's that. We run an awful lot of equipment. It's just the nuts and bolts of running a business, and CapEx and. Buying and purchasing new equipment, making sure that operations have what they need, resources that they need. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. Communication, because we run a fairly dynamic operation, and there is no one way to approach vineyard management, we have to be relatively fluid and adaptable. So you have to communicate really well internally and externally with clients, and just making sure everything's happening the way it needs to happen. You know, and there's always a lot of there's lots of meetings to make that happen. Of course, we're utilizing the Teams and Skype and Zoom more than you ever thought you would. My kids are better at it now than I am because of school. Who knew a year ago? But yeah, but then those good days are when you're out there walking a piece of property, getting out on a day like this, or even a rainy day for that matter. Just looking at walking vineyards and walking new developments. And we also do a little bit of work with realtors now and again, and go out and look at a piece of property and evaluate it for feasibility. So a lot of times it's where new clients to the mix will come from those avenues.
You talked about kind of being ahead of the mechanization curve a little bit with some of your work. Obviously, that's one of the bigger changes in the industry that we've seen. I'm curious, from Results Partners perspective, from your work, how has the mechanization changed, and how has your work with mechanization changed, and how has it changed within the industry?
Yeah, I've always been kind of the champion. I mean, everyone's been full support of it, not too many years ago, I mean, mechanization was a bad word. I think that at this point, in the last 7 or 8 years, it's really changed a lot. And I think that most operations now see it as having a place somewhere in their program. If not the entire operation, it's a good piece of it, or a certain program that they're working with. It's a very viable option. There's always labor concerns and an aging labor force, and a bit unpredictable. So, I mean, we've had I've been lucky enough to been involved with that for quite a while now. Started out with one harvester, just about would have been, I want to say 2014, and then we've added to the fleet, and that's now we actually machine pick about a third of what our total acreage or total tons each year, which is a big change. It didn't have the best perception. It's improved. The machinery's improved a lot, and the way you operate the machinery is a big part of it too. You go into it with the right mindset that you're troubleshooting and you want to make something work. You're not trying to impose something. If you just go out there and set them up one way and just and beat up trellis and cause a lot of repairs, no one's going to like that very much. But I think that in general, I mean, mechanization's been used around the world for a long time. But here, I think that the key to making it work is you're looking at picking and having picking the best product possible rather than stripping a vine completely, right? And it's a different kind of mindset. It's using mechanization in a quality product. And so that's how we've approached that. And if it's going to succeed, people need to like the product. So it's been fun. It's been fun to do. There again, I mean, it suits me well because I'm been kind of a gearhead, my whole life. And I think there's a lot of people in the industry that like machinery, but I mean that's really kind of where I came in on it. And it's funny how it's always been there. If I had to do it every day, I probably wouldn't like it, right? If I had to do development every day, but I just like the diversity of things. And there again, that's what, the custom farming allows you to do. It's like you're not going to the same vineyard every day. You're going to a different spot. And tomorrow you might have a new project, and, like I said before. So, yeah.
It's a pretty fast change for the kind of, like you said, the kind of how people view how people view mechanization within the industry. So you talk about your clients now, that there's something they're expecting, or they're okay with being part of the program.
Yeah, I think the wineries have had a chance to deal with it too. You have to handle machine picked fruit differently. I think they've realized that in some cases it's a economical benefit, because if it's picked well and clean, it can arrive basically it's destemmed and ready for fermentation. And so I think that there's really, for the estate operations, there's a real major benefit there. But, it's trying to, the key is just bringing a level of professionalism to everything you do, and I think that resonates with people, especially in the wine business,
So you talk about the term custom farming, which I love that term. You have obviously working with a lot of different clients, a lot of different levels of expertise, a lot of different levels of money, a lot of different types of sites. I'm curious, is there a typical client for you, or a typical amount of work you have to do, or are all of them fairly unique?
Well, they're fairly unique anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of runs the spectrum. 10 years ago, it was a lot of folks purchasing relatively small pieces of property and becoming growers, through us, and have some really good experiences with those folks. What's enjoyable about that is they show up happy, because it's not like we're here to fix your plumbing. We're here to put in this vineyard, and it's going to be viticulturally sound, as well as on the small scale. It's going to also be part of your landscaping. And so that's the fun part. You don't want to doing stuff very nice, orderly, and professional, and everyone's happy at the end. That's the one spectrum. And over the years, in the last 10 years or so, primarily, I'd say probably a lot of it came out of the recession. Not speaking for everyone, but I mean, there's a number of wine companies, wineries, estates that decided that maybe outsourcing vineyard management was the thing to do. Maybe they focused more on their resources on winemaking and marketing and selling their wines, and bringing a team. It's kind of hard to replicate that when there's good people out there, good individuals out there, but when you bring in a team and then you add up all that experience, sounds like another promo again, but it's kind of hard to replicate that. And it's there, if going into the business and planning a vineyard and learning along the way could be fun some of the time, but you're more than likely going to learn the hard way at some point. And so I think there's the benefit of that. So yeah, I think we run the gamut. There's smaller producers, and then there's estates that are pretty large, and we work with closely, and we try to integrate. We don't see ourselves. I don't feel as myself as being a contractor. Or a partner, as the name would imply, I suppose. But it's a long-term thing too. I mean, a development client typically is somebody that you're starting a relationship with, and you hope to be managing their vineyard for a long time. So you're going to have, just like with Mother Nature, there's going to be good years and bad years, and it's how those people handle those situations. Feels like.
So if a client comes to you, how much flexibility do they have in terms of what services you'll do and you'll offer? Are you kind of how customizable is what RP will do for them?
Yeah, we're pretty open. I mean, we're in the service business. We obviously have standards. You need to be able to stand behind your work, but that's not typically something that we're confronted with. Yeah.
So you mentioned. I want to go back to Sonoma for a second. I'm curious about the changes you saw there while you were working in Sonoma. and then kind of how that compares to the changes you've seen here. What was Sonoma like when you left versus when you kind of started working in it?
Well, at Sonoma County, even when I was a kid, but definitely in during my parents' time there, I mean, it was fairly diversified. There was dairies and chicken farms, and there were some grapes and cattle and sheep, and that, nothing against that area. I have a lot of connections back to that area, but it feels more like a mono ag down there now. When coming up here, my wife and I felt, it's very similar up here in the Willamette Valley to Sonoma County where I grew up. It's one of the things that attracted us to it. You got the mountains and the snow, you got the coast out here, and you've got really nice, summers. Growing the same type of grapes, So but the handwriting was on the wall that things were getting busy down there. And I see a lot of similarity still to this day. It's taken a long time. It's taken 2 generations to establish this wine industry, to become world renowned, to have the draw that it has. And that brings in more talent, and we just improve. But there's also other things that come along with that. We need business. People need jobs. We need tourism. But there comes congestion. There comes lots of different personalities and mindsets. So just pointing out the obvious. But I think that we kind of figured that this might be 10 to 20 years behind. So far it's kind of proved, from what I remember being there and living in Sonoma County, I think that we're kind of going that same. Now, that being said, I think that Oregon does have, has done a really good job of branding itself. I think that there's much more of a broader, holistic approach to farming in general up here, but in the wine industry. And that's important, I think, to keep. I think that's distinct. And so if people keep making the right decisions, being proactive, we don't want things imposed upon us here. We just want to be good stewards. I mean, honestly, it's how I feel. I'm not just saying this for the camera. It's because we also want to live here. And raise kids here and things like that. So, I wonder about that too. You look at the price of land. That property value is going way up for a lot of reasons right now. But you see what has happened in Sonoma and Napa, where it's perhaps it's challenging for people to find a place to live, and you need all spectrums. You need people to be able to work and service businesses and so on and so forth. And so you hope that things can stay affordable for everybody, and here in the area, so that you can continue down that path. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I would like my kids to, if they wanted to stick around and come back after school, after college, and live here. If they want to get in the wine industry, great. If not, but if they wanted to come back here, I'd like for them to be able to afford to. And I think that could be, something that comes with this wine industry. And to continue down that path. I mean, it's still we say that the price of land is going up. I do. We observe that, but it's still relative to other wine industries, other wine regions. It's pretty affordable, and I think that's one of the reasons what's just redirecting people here, in addition to the quality product that's being produced. And
Absolutely. You talked about your first impressions of the valley itself. I'm curious, what were your first impressions of Oregon's wine industry? What did you think of it when you first started becoming familiar with it?
Well, quite honestly, at the beginning, I think it was where I was situated when I first came. When I moved up, I was working for a production vineyard, and a lot of those vineyards were on the valley floor. And here in Oregon, and at least in the Willamette Valley, it's the general thought is that heavier soils, thicker, deeper soils don't produce as high quality grapes. And there's definitely, I guess in some realm there's validity to that. It all depends on your program. And so I came here and started in a production environment, which, even though it was close proximity to the Dundee Hills, it wasn't in the Dundee Hills. Probably would have helped if I would have been more involved, got out more, was more proactive, joined more groups and associations. Looking back, I probably should have done more of that. Probably should do more of that today. You always find a project that keeps you busy. We delayed this interview because we were planting, right? So kind of create your own issues. But I think there's as the industry's grown, those larger production sites make better sense because we have larger programs. And we're trying to be price competitive. If you're $20 bottle of wine or below, you need to be buying. You get your grape costs have to align with that, and that has to make sense for the grower. If that's going to make sense, if they're going to get paid less per ton, they need to be able to produce more. So there's a place for it, and we can get a whole other discussion. I think personally, it's good to have that. I think it shows that we've arrived. That gets a lot of new wine drinkers in. They can afford that. We've heard all this before, buy that wine, and then they tend to believe that people tend to buy up, especially as their income rises. So I think it's good, and it just gets the Oregon wine in more hands, and it's just a different aspect. But we're a small industry up here, relatively speaking. Still really small.
So I want to talk about we talked about mechanization already, but I'm curious about other viticulture vineyard sort of technologies or practices that have changed in your time. What are some of the biggest developments in vineyard work that you've seen in your time working?
I think it's the improvement of mechanization in general. Some of this stuff's just been a kind of a natural evolution and fairly basic, but I think the industry as a whole we used to go through and hand hedge an awful lot. We did that an awful lot. We did a lot of hoeing of weeds, and you look back and go, why did we do that? And there's such simple ways to mechanize that. Sometimes you just have to, it takes the right people to start it, and you just kind of get used to doing things because that's the way you've done it, right? And so you just have to look ahead and be more proactive. I think machine harvesting is big. Cat. He's going to jump up on my lap next, but that's probably key. Yeah, I think that you have to. It's also understanding the best times to still do things by hand, in those key times, and then how you bring in equipment. The thing is with mechanization, I don't believe, even though there are vineyards in certain regions that are darn near 100% mechanized, I don't believe we'll ever get there here. There's some vineyards and some hillsides that just won't allow for it. And we also sell premium product. I think you'll be able to justify that, the cost, the price. But it's mechanization. It's the blending of the mechanization with hand labor. And utilizing those two things the best. And, most effectively, and just the key is just keeping people motivated to come to work and enjoy what they're doing and take care of things.
So you talked earlier about 2020, and I have a couple questions about it. Obviously, a couple of very impactful parts of 2020. So we'll start with the pandemic and its effect on your work and on your kind of day-to-day, week-to-week work. What was sort of the immediate aftermath last spring, and what were the kind of the adaptations you had to make to keep your work going?
Well, in general, it was we tried to be proactive right off the bat and be very cautious with it, and social distancing and masking, there was a lot of other things that requirements that were put into place that just in terms of sanitation and so on and so forth. It was a challenge as it was for just about anybody in any business. But then when the fires came, it was like, wow, what's next? And it was, during that time period, it was tough because we were inundated with smoke, and we have a perishable crop out there, and so we made it to, it was, at that point it was optional. We have grapes to pick, and and when where we were hand picking, and a lot of people decided they wanted to come to work, and they were equipped with masks. That was handy. We already had those, but we didn't pick for very long during those days. But the bottom line is, folks need. Not everybody has the luxury to just take the day off, right? And there was expectations out there, so it all turned out. You adapt, but you got to stay ahead of things, and that was definitely a team effort.
What was the impact for you in terms of, you mentioned obviously the fires during harvest? How much did that alter your work? How much did it alter your schedule? I mean, you mentioned you were still had to pick. Were you picking less in less places, or how did the smoke affect that?
Well, as it turned out, I mean, there was a lot of grapes that were rejected, and so those who had contracts for those grapes decided they were going to forgo it altogether. But what that spurred was this whole process of reaching out to those people who did want to continue, who needed grapes. And basically in the middle of harvest, while we're trying to pick, creating new contracts and navigating all that added a whole other layer to things. And unfortunately, at the end of the year, just about everybody found a home for their grapes. And there's definitely, I mean, I understand it's a dynamic thing, and there's different reasons out there, and I understand, why some folks decided it was too much of a gamble to take the grapes. It's a big commitment. And there's some other folks that decided, well, that, there's an opportunity to jump out there and buy up some grapes and help some growers out. And there's a lot more people buying crop insurance now.
We've heard that a couple of times this fall, or this spring and last fall.
Yeah.
Interesting how that works.
Yeah. But that's ag, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned learning hard lessons before. I guess this is another one of those kind of hard lessons.
Yeah. But it's like, there again, it's like something seems really challenging. You're like, oh, it's never. Not that any of that was good that happened last year, but there always, so far in my life, it seems like that. Initially, it seems rough. Sometimes you got to put your head down and you can navigate it. And that's what really creates a team atmosphere, And that's a really rewarding part of my job, is when you see people step up and take initiative, who work smart, that's pretty rewarding, Makes you happy. makes the team solid, Bad. I mean, who to count on in those times when things get bad and they're there. Everyone's pulling through. That was definitely the case last year. So it gives me a lot of confidence in people I work around, and the industry,
I'm talking about the industry a little bit more in general, and it's sort of how it reacted to both the pandemic and the smoke, the fires. What kind of adaptations did you see? How did the industry change last year? And as we're coming out of it this year and hopefully having a more normal harvest, what do you see kind of going forward for the industry in those regards?
Well, one is crop insurance. I already mentioned that. I don't know. I can't really speak to the winemaking side that much. I'm sure they're learning a lot there on how to deal with this. Not wanting to deal with it again, I'm sure. But it's a process, I mean, it's a global wine industry thing. It's unfortunately fires affected the entire West Coast and Australia. I mean, so I would assume at some point we're going to have a pretty good hopefully we can prevent fires somehow or reduce it. Some of that's natural, but I think that there's enough smart people in the industry, and I think that we'll get to a point where we'll make some strides there. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be debated at harvest time. Should I pick it early before it's really ready to go to reduce the exposure to the smoke in that instance, or should I machine pick it, or should I hand pick it? And you've done a lot of these interviews, and there's a lot of different opinions on things. So mine's just one of them. Yeah. So.
Sure. I'm going to go back to something you mentioned a second ago about kind of the team around you at Results and the staff. Obviously, you mentioned kind of being in a senior management role now as you've worked up there. Tell me about what you kind of look for as you're hiring, training people, and sort of the leadership style you're going for there.
Yeah, want people who are self-motivated or trustworthy, and anymore it seems like you get a pretty good feel for somebody that you can trust. Someone's got good morals and ethics. People can see right through that if you don't. And those are the kind of people you want to work with. Those are the kind of people that our clients want to work with. This is a long-term deal. So, good problem solvers, people that ask questions, ask the right questions. Well, no question's a bad question, really, when you get started. But you know what I'm saying? It's you got to have a little bit of drive. You don't have to have an ag background by any means, but understanding the seasonality of agriculture and the work expectations. That's what it is. It hasn't changed ever. Who knows? It might change in the future here. But when it's time to make hay, it's time to make hay, as the saying goes. And we all there again at RP, we all have our respective roles and things that we focus on. But at the end of the day, everyone's wearing a lot of different hats. And when it's time to pick grapes, that's what we're all kind of here for. So everything kind of comes to a screeching halt, and that's the focus. And everybody understands that, in the industry as well. You might be working on a development project like, we're going to go and switch over to machine harvesting now, or whatever the case may be. And it's a fun time, most of the time, at harvest. It's luckily it's pretty short up here. I've got friends down in Lodi and California. Their grape season twice as long as ours, and but up here it's solid 4 to 6 weeks depending on the year. That you're really kind of in the thick of things, so it's easy to make that big push. We're working 7 days a week, whatever you need to do.
So you talked a little bit about some of the changes you've seen in Oregon. I'm curious, as you look ahead for the wine industry, kind of in general, what is Oregon wine going to look like in the future?
I think there's some. I think we're going to have to see some more vertical integration. I think there's going to be consolidation, just because costs are rising in general out there. I don't want to be doom and gloom, because it's not, but I think that if you're vertically integrated, you have your hands on more levers. And so that means taking it to the end product. There'll be places for small high-end growers, but it might take time to get into those programs and prove a vineyard out and the quality. And growing grapes is not too dissimilar, and selling grapes is not too dissimilar to selling wine. I mean, you have a product out here, and you have to tell the story and why it's better than somebody else's, and why it's going to make quality wine. And so there's that whole process.
And what about as you look ahead for yourself? What do you see in your own future and for the future at RP?
Well, I'm planning a 3-acre vineyard, so I was going to retire next year. No, it's business as usual. It's an exciting time right now, and we're growing in a lot of different ways, and No, I have no plans to change any of that. But back to your earlier question about where are things going, it's the industry. It's going to continue to evolve. I see there's more estate operations now, and the estates it's a bit of a different model per se for us, and that is there's just more going on, and so there's more folks looking for more holistic type farming. Maybe it's incorporation of permaculture, animal husbandry. Regenerative farming is a big thing now too. And so, as an industry, we have to, we need to adapt and look at new ways of doing things. And so I think we'll see more of that, and I think the estates will be able to provide that. I mean, there's also this whole other tourism element too. If you're an estate, and so many people have invested in tasting rooms and direct-to-consumer sales and creating the wine experience. And we're involved in that to a degree. The vineyards being well kept and well designed, and everything else that goes into that, and making it a pleasant place. That's what's kind of fun. There's just a lot of things going on, and I think that we'll see more of that. And I think it kind of supports that overall Oregon standpoint and that image in the wine industry of just more holistic. It's an incorporation of the whole farming units, the closed loop thing. There's a lot of people that farm sustainably, a lot of people that are live certified, a lot of people that philosophically like farming organically. They may not be certified, but they're doing whatever they can from a philosophical standpoint to do that. So those are all good things.
You talk about that change toward sort of sustainable, holistic agriculture, maybe a little bit more permaculture, animals. How does that change your role from what you're doing and when you're advising? Is there more you have to learn and know? Is there more tools you have to do that?
Yeah, it would evolve into having more expertise and the right expertise and resources there. But there again, it's I'm part of running a business and providing a service, and to many folks who maybe are absentee or aren't directly involved with the farming or the property, the overall management of a property. I think that there's going to be more people that need that, and I think that you're helping them out if they could have one point of contact. Kind of brings it all together, and the accountability comes with that too. You have to realize that and anticipate that, and that's okay. But you need to have the right team in place, and that's it's kind of part of what I do with the rest of the management team. What's the vision? Where are things going? How are you going to adapt? How are you going to be viable?
Interesting. So if someone were to come to you and ask about somebody who wanted to do what you did in the future, what would your words of wisdom be to getting into the industry and kind of the initial path to take?
I still don't feel there's any substitution for hard work, and that doesn't mean necessarily going out and digging a ditch with a shovel for 2 months straight. But you ought to get out and understand. Spend some time in everybody's shoes. Understand what everybody's up to. You can't graduate from school and expect to get a six-figure salary or a management title or a manager title. I think maybe I'm just because I'm getting older now and I'm fitting into this old codger thing, but it's just like you got to put your time in and prove yourself. And everything else will fall into place. If you're trustworthy and do what you say you're going to do, follow through. So it's I don't think there's much of a substitute. You have to be smart too. You have to make you got to have some luck. But that all comes with it. So it's that would be my advice to somebody just starting out. Yeah.
Perfect. Like it.
Get the foundation down too. You know, it's really easy, and I'm to blame too. It's like, do you want to go chase a special project? And there's definitely times for those kinds of things, but a lot of it comes down to, I mean, the root of it, it's farming. What I'm involved with. We're farming grapes, but it's farming, and there's commonality there, and that is work on getting the basics done, get the timing right, you know, get to the special projects and the fun projects when you can, or cleave out some time when you got the foundation. Make sure your weeds are under control, you know. You know, it's really basic. Yeah, it's in that regard.
Like it. All right, that's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover here today that we should have covered?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your stories, for your hospitality on this perfect day. Thank you for rescheduling so we could have this perfect day together out here.
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Thank you. Appreciate it.